For more on this story, we can bring in our international affairs commentator, Douglas Herbert. Doug, with so many people not voting, does this election have any legitimacy, democratic legitimacy, if you will?
Well, any, yeah. I mean, any is a big term. But look, when you look at the overall number, 2 out of 3 French people sitting out this election, a lot of them not even aware that it was taking place. Even more startling, looking at the number among the youngest voters, those who had the right for the first time to vote, 18 to 24 years old, 9 out of 10 of them sat out this election. So, yeah, it does raise questions about democratic legitimacy because you realize, and, you know, we could actually bring up a little chart. This was published by Le Parisien newspaper. This chart, the numbers there, what are they? They show what the actual tally was, the score, if you take into account the abstention. That is, this is the percentage that the winning candidates in each of the 13 French regions, which were participating in this election, actually got. So we heard, when the results came in last night, that, say, the traditional right-wing presidents of some of the major regions got over 45%, 50%. It was described in the French press by some as a thumping victory, a big win for these candidates. Look what they really were. We're talking about scores as low as in the Grand Est region of eastern France, northeast, just over 11%. Up to 15%, those are the actual numbers. So when you talk about democratic legitimacy, the people who are going to be governing, leading these regions of France, in some cases regions with millions and millions of people, in the case of Île-de-France, where Paris is, we're talking about a region of over 12 million people. This is someone who was elected with about 11 to 12, 13% of the vote. That's nothing. It's a tenth of the population. So yeah, and these people sitting out these elections, it's not simply it wasn't simply a case of apathy. A lot of them really just didn't vote. It was almost an intellectual stance. They think, is it going to make a difference? Or they don't necessarily think this system is the right system. They prefer more direct forms of political action. So, for instance, I recently became a French citizen. I'm happy. I was happy to vote. I was excited to exercise my right to vote. I went to the polls. It was sort of a statement, right? You also recently became a French citizen, Delano. There's nothing embarrassing about it. You didn't vote, right? We were talking before the show, and you said I didn't vote. And you know what? I'm not judging you for it. You and tens of millions of other French didn't vote. And you all have, some of you have very good reasons for not doing so. So it's not a value judgment, but it does raise questions whether this particular exercise is legitimate in terms of, does it reflect the democratic will of the people? Some people say abstention is a vote. It's a way of voting. But for a lot of people, it really isn't. It's just a way of sitting it out.
Now, Doug, this election, this was the last litmus test, if you will, before the presidential vote next year. Where does that leave the two frontrunners in that vote, Marine Le Pen and the President Emmanuel Macron?
In a very bad place. Look, all around, especially in Macron's case, he has a movement, La République en Marche, the Marchers, as they call them. It was a movement created for his presidential election in 2017. It didn't exist during the last regional elections in 2015. He didn't get 10%. He got less than 10% in these regional elections. In 3 regions, Macron's movement, his party, was knocked out in the first round, didn't even get to the second round. So Macron is essentially not sidelined. He's still touted as ending up in the runoff in the next year's presidential election against Marine Le Pen. Now, that has been the presumption all along, that he would be facing the far right, head of the far right party, Marine Le Pen, when it gets to the second round next year. Is that presumption still as solid after you see the results of these elections, where the far right party did not get a single region? It had been hoping for the Provence, French Riviera, Alps region in the southeast. Didn't get that. It had a drubbing at the hands of the right-wing candidate. So it raises questions, not just about Marine Le Pen, but about Macron's standing going into this election, and a lot of our assumptions about what that presidential race is going to look like. Basically, everything is up in the air, and a lot of it is going to ride on perhaps the turnout next year, and whether between now and then the political class here can do something to convince the voters that it's worth turning out to the polls. Usually in a presidential election, if there's one election you go to vote for, it's that one.
Indeed.
Let's see if those numbers translate.
Thank you very much for that, Douglas Herbert there.